I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Daniel. I work for the Leading Edge Forum and my job is actually kind of a management consultant, but I hate that term. I help people prepare strategies for whatever challenges they are facing. Usually I do it in a very small groups, and this is actually my first attempt to run a session like this. I'm a little bit nervous. But anyway, let's try. I hope you will enjoy this kind of a workshop and this analysis in a similar way as I do. In the chat, I have pasted a link to the Miro board. You may suspect that this is a workshop and it will be a pretty interactive one. Because my role most of the time is to stay silent and let people and participants do the heavy lifting. So I hope you have opened the Miro. If you can navigate to the section 0.0, which is on the left. And the name says here on the left, let me uncover it. I will share my screen. Can I get screen sharing capability? If not.
Yeah, just you're yours now.
Okay, thank you. So let me share my screen, this one. I hope you can see my browser right now. So here's the board that I have prepared today. It has a number of steps in it. But what I would like to start with is actually to go to the section 0.0, which is the first one on the left, and ask you, what is the ideal output of this session? What do you want? Because we have a lot of flexibility here. We can do various stuff, and I would like to take the opportunity that I will be working closely for you, and so put the control over the session in your hands. So take a post-it note from the bar on the left, put it into the what's the ideal output session, and basically type in what's your expectation. If you want to navigate through Miro board, please try to zoom in or zoom out. If you have a scroll bar, if you have a mouse with a scroll, try scrolling it to zoom out and zoom in. There is this small overview here, which also can be used to do that. Yep, I see plenty of people navigated to the section 0.0. So I will be addressing some as you type them in. The biggest post-it card says different type of strategies for the company, techniques to create a strategy, KPIs, and measuring the success of strategy. I will cover this. How to know when to buy, build, or contract. This will be definitely discussed. How to really talk about value when the organization doesn't know. We will cover this. Engaging executives over time. That's a difficult subject, but I trust we will get there. How to consider my company's singularity in a strategy tool. I don't understand it, so maybe we will need a little bit more explanation in this space. Understand worldly mapping framework. That's the core of the workshop, so that will be easy. How to align strategic value and operations team value produced. This will be covered indirectly. If it isn't explained in the workshop, please call it out. How to determine which is the best strategy to follow inside the organization. Okay, so that will be interesting talk. I think I have a sense of what you are expecting from this workshop. So I would like to ask you a couple of questions. If we move slightly to the right, there is a number of boxes. Who can build your strategy? Who is responsible for it? What makes strategic thinking difficult? And how would you rate your existing corporate company strategy? Please try to use the same approach. If you know who can build your strategy, take a post-it note and paste it and type an answer. Chris, of course, this is a wrong answer. If you have any idea who could build your strategy, please say it. Who's responsible for the strategy? What makes strategic thinking difficult? And how would you rate your existing strategy? From 0, which means it doesn't exist and you are doing everything by chance, to 10, it's a rock solid approach into the future. So when I look at who can build your strategy, there are certainly two kinds of people present in the audience, because some people say it's collective work, everyone in the organization. Some people say it's the board, C-level, upper management, and the managers. Some people say it's the business units and the board, so it goes in this group. And the last person that's editing it is everyone participate to the path. Yeah. So this is very interesting question, because none of you said that there is an external consultant that can do the work, which was so far my reality, that in each situation I asked that question, I got the answer that it's some external strategy work. Some people put a lot of focus on the board. The reality is that the board alone cannot do the strategy because it doesn't understand the field. Inside the organizations, you have plenty of people exposed to external environment who know what's happening out there. And I haven't found efficient enough communication mechanism that would allow to transfer that information back and forth and to let the board to figure out what everyone in the organization thinks. So the real answer for this is that the strategy can be built by the board, yes, but it requires support from everyone in the organization. And what's the most important bit here is that nobody external to the organization can build the strategy because that person doesn't know your reality. So you are if you pay an external consultant to build a strategy for you, you are paying that person to learn your environment. And you give up control of your organization to somebody who will not pay for the consequences. That's why, for the question who is responsible for this strategy, it's the whole company, everyone, but the leaders are responsible for aligning people and making sure that individual actions are orchestrated. And the problem with strategic thinking is, of course, it's status quo. It's so much easier and safer to do. There is a lot of power play going on inside every organization, and overcoming it is extremely, extremely difficult. Actually, my workshop will not help you in that. You can build the best argumentation and the best strategy ever, but if your board is concerned with short-term bonus, I don't think there is anything you can do. Changing environment and quality of data is extremely interesting aspect because it touches the most important aspect of the strategy. You have to deal with the uncertainty. If you are in a situation where you have perfect data and stable environment, there is no strategy. There are just easy decisions in terms of what's more beneficial to the company. It was mentioned in the previous talk that budgeting is incompatible with Agile. And one of the reasons was that you cannot really say how the future will look like. And if you cannot really say how the future will look like, it's almost impossible to calculate return on investment. So in that light, a strategy is closer to the risk handling framework. So you would rather think first, what may cause the situation to go wrong? And what should you do to avoid that? Of course, that's very difficult, but we will get there. Nobody tried to rate the existing strategy. Okay, so let's leave it here. Okay, so more or less, we understand what is the situation, what do you want to learn, what challenges do you see. I will now proceed to introduce you to the worldly mapping framework. I'm not sure if you have seen the presentation which happened before, but the core of the worldly mapping framework is the concept called evolution. So everything which is out there, like every component that you can identify, goes from genesis to commodity. Genesis is an experiment, highly unpredictable without a market. And why it's without the market? Because it's the first thing of a kind. It broadens your knowledge, but it cannot be solved because nobody knows how to use it. Commodity is something so well known and so standardized that the brand doesn't matter. Everyone knows how to use it. Everyone is expected to use it. And it's not a competitive advantage. It's like the power socket in your home or house. And there are two transitionary phases, which one are custom built. Because when people see that experiments work, they want to put that work into the business. So they try to assemble solutions. Custom built things cannot be bought from the market because there is no experts in the field. You have to figure out the solution for yourself. And there is a lot of risk and failure. And product means that you can actually go to the shop and buy a solution. Why I'm talking about evolution in this space? Because evolution is an excellent tool to quantify how much uncertainty there is in a given component. If you think, for example, about computing power, if you think about characteristics, and the table below actually shows all those, the table below shows all those characteristics. If you think about computing, ubiquity, ubiquitous, certainty, commonly understood, etc., etc., you can qualify computing as commodity, meaning it's very stable right now, and there is low uncertainty associated with it. If you think, for example, about gene therapy, it is something between genesis and custom, which means it's highly uncertain, highly risky, and any existing business model around gene therapy should take into the account that things may go in a wrong direction. So if we have a component, we can look at this table and try to estimate on which level of evolution it is and how much uncertainty is associated with the component. So if we navigate to the point 1.0, there is a number of components I have identified for you. Components, practices, tools. And I would like you to vote. Where do you think given component is on the evolution axis? Take a post-it note, look at the mobile phone. For me, it's something between product and utility, so I will paste a post-it note here. Try to assess as many components as possible. Awesome. Thank you. So I will now go through all of them, and I will try to show a couple of important things that probably happened and may be quite new or unexpected. If you look at the mobile phone, you definitely can see that a lot of you considers a mobile phone somewhere between product and utility. That's a very good interpretation. I haven't seen a single person pointing out phones that are custom built or are in the utility space, which probably means we don't know everything, but you are still very consistent in your rating. So nothing new here. Gene therapy is a little bit more interesting because there is a group. It doesn't work. Changing your analysis after I started talking will not work in this space. Gene therapy is a little bit more interesting because plenty of you think that it's in the Genesis custom build space because I said so earlier. And the reality is that gene therapy is such a broad component that it cannot be analyzed in this way. Because there are certain types of cancer that can be cured with gene therapy. And for that types of cancer, it's actually a product. It's repeatable, it's proved to work, and there is an offering which you can buy and they will cure you by altering your genes. Of course, it will not work for everything, but if you see the evolution analysis like this, when there is a group of people saying it's one thing, and there is a group or a single person saying other thing, it's not about who is wrong, who is right, but about finding out what those people know, what those don't, or what those people know that those don't. The next thing is the space rocket, and you can see here that the clustering is in the custom build space, but there is a huge range going on from almost Genesis to the product. What does it mean? It means that we have probably many different implementations in the market, some of which, like current Elon Musk initiatives, are very close to the product space because what they are trying to commercialize spaceflight. We have plenty of implementations which are in the custom build space, and those are probably a little bit older American and Russian space programs. And we probably have a number of initiatives which are still in the genesis and which are trying to figure out how to build space rockets. Again, it doesn't mean that any one of you is wrong. It just means that you have different understanding of the world. And if something similar appears on your map, you may want to explore what are the differences and how the situation looks in your specific situation. Because if you were in the space industry having this wide range of interpretations, probably means you don't have coherent view of your environment or coherent enough view of your environment. Democracy is actually a trap, which I like very much because, again, it's a very broad component. It's almost a symbol. And we cannot really compare two different democracies and say which of them has more uncertainty or is more mature. We can compare individual practices, but as such, the symbol cannot be analyzed in a worldly map. So in order to do this analysis properly, we would have to split democracy into specific things like voting, independent courts, I don't know what else, and then look at those single things and try to analyze them with the evolution. And take away food, pretty standard, there is nothing to talk about except geography, because takeaway food may not be available all around the world, or it is available all around the world, but it may vary from country to country or from location to location. And the car, plenty of you thinks it's between product and utility, which means that probably very soon we will see cars as a service. Allergen disclosure, it's again very interesting stuff. Some people believe it almost doesn't exist right now. Some people believe it's custom built. I'm sure there are countries which have very stable allergen disclosure systems. So this exercise, first of all, taught you how to use evolution or how to classify evolution and judge how much uncertainty is within the component. But it also highlights the value of discussions. Right? It's not really about drawing post-it notes on a worldly map or in a board, but it's all about finding points where you may be wrong. Because for me, the most important thing about strategy is that it's all about things that can go wrong. And if it's all about things that can go wrong, your understanding of the situation is the first and the most important aspect of it. That's why very often people say that strategy isn't linear, that you cannot prepare a strategy for 5 years, but you have to work in very short iterations because you think you understand your environment, you take actions that you think are the best in your environment, and then you learn that they were or weren't the best in that situation. This causes your understanding to change. And the faster you are going through those loops, the more adaptive you are. And here is the correlation between strategy and agile. There is no way to write a strategy for an extended period of time because the uncertainty will kill it. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what will be all of the consequences of your future actions. You cannot really know. You will never be able to tell what will be the future opportunities in advance. You may guess, but you will never know it for sure. That's why you have to remain adaptive and nimble along the entire path. So we have went through the evolution exercise. You've done it very well. Now I would like to introduce you to 2 more things. One is the value chain. The name is a bit unfortunate, but it goes as simple as that. You put stakeholders on the top. Let me write something on it. You put stakeholders on the top by convention. Then you say, what is the user need of those stakeholders? And then you say, what do you need to satisfy that user need? So we have stakeholders who want to drink a cup of tea. To make a cup of tea, you need a cup, some tea and hot water, and you descend into this as much as necessary. To make hot water, you need kettle, you need some power. If you have this value chain, you do the evolution exercise and you translate the value chain into a worldly map, which is basically the same value chain as in here, but there is an additional axis, evolution, which changes the position of all the components. The general rule of thumb is that components which are here in this space are very easy to outsource. Why? Because there is low uncertainty and they don't change too much. You can put KPIs on the top of that. Whereas component in this space, in the Genesis and custom build, cannot be outsourced because you don't know how they will look in the future. It's like, for example, people are concerned today about, let's say, cold fusion. They want to be able to generate energy. Can building of cold fusion reactor be outsourced currently to someone? Probably yes, but what will be the results? You will get a product that you don't understand and somebody else will retain the knowledge. So you will pay somebody else to learn at your expense. That's not a situation you want to be in, because if things are highly uncertain, like in this space, what may happen in the future, there may be value here. If things are very defined, the value has been already explored and the market is probably already shared. If there is uncertainty, value still hasn't been explored and may be explored in the future. Let's look at the example, because I have prepared one. And this is the map that was done for the, let's say, for the chip producers industry, like computer processors. So we have people who want to build IoT solutions and want to build artificial intelligence solutions. What do they need? They definitely need cloud. They need specialized computing power. To deliver computing power, you need processors. To run processors, you need power. But to build processors, you need processor factories and designers who can actually design those chips and operate factories. What I've told you is that things on the right are easy to outsource. So you are very unlikely to build your own power plant. If you are the customer who wants to build AI and IoT, you are very likely to pay for cloud and pay for computing power. You don't care how the computing power is delivered to you. But if you are in the business of delivering computing to those people, what is important is that those two things are in the custom build space and they cannot be easily scaled. If you want to enter this space, you will have to acquire custom built components. And since you cannot buy them in the market, you have to build them, and that takes time and experimentation and failures. If you have a few computer chip designers, before you will be able to hire them in your location, you will probably have to train them, and this again will take a lot of time and money. This worldly map is also called a context for a company who operates here. Why? Because if your business is about selling computing power to different customers and you have your specific providers, then the context for you are what those customers are doing and what people in this space are doing on the bottom. Any change in this space, like for example, IoT accelerating or AI accelerating, it means dramatic changes for your business, which you need to be prepared for. On the other hand, if there is a few designers out there in the world, you are in a very unfortunate situation where change in this space will highlight the constraint here. So if we have a context, we can look at our company internals, and now imagine that you are saying you are selling computing power. So who's your customer? Your customer are cloud companies who want to get access to computing power and resell it. To make computers, you need a number of stuff. This is all commodity utility stuff, but there are two things which are not. And those are intellectual properties and design components. Now the question is how to marry those two, right? Because we know what will happen in the outer world. So it's here, it's our context, broad context. And we have to think how this context will influence this specific situation. our company. So what we know? From the context, we know that because those two things are getting more and more popular, we will see a surge in demand for specialized computing resources. And here, we know that building specialized computing resources requires this part, which is so difficult to obtain. So if we protect intellectual property in this space, or if we protect design capabilities in this space, we will be impossible to remove from this value chain. But anyway, that was a lot of talking to me. What's important here is that strategy needs to operate in a broader context. It's not just about your organization, it's much more about the environment your organization operates in. How do you analyze your environment? You think about your customers and what they are doing. The next thing is that if you know what is the value chain or what's the worldly map of your customer's business, you may think, how do you want to influence it? That's why I would like you right now to use those small empty worldly maps below. Basically take one, put your name near to it, and try to prepare a worldly map for your environment. Think about who is your customer, what user needs your customer has, and what's the underlying value chain that is necessary to fulfill those user needs. That's quite a difficult exercise, and that's why we are doing it right now together, so I could answer any questions and difficulties that will arise. If you have any question, just type it into the chat. I will try to answer it instantly. To start, navigate to a worldly map and start thinking about who is your customer. For example, if I think about the currency exchange office, who is the customer? The customer is a probably traveler who needs money, who needs local money. To get the local money, he goes to my company, which is currency exchange. And now to operate the currency exchange, I need, let's say, some reserves. I need an office, which is custom built. And I also need probably a clerk who will do the operation. I want you to do something similar for your businesses, for your organizations. If you don't have one, try to imagine one. I will give you 5 more minutes for that. I can see that the activity slows down. So what you have created is the value chain of your, most of the time, I assume, of your organization. The next step in developing a strategy, because those are the components that you have under your control in your environment. The next step in developing the strategy is to think about where are the changes coming. I was talking about the context, which is everything which is outside of your organization, and this is the source of the changes. Your company is under your control, so you can change there anything you want, but you cannot change anything in the context. So if you look at your organization, if we have, let's say, travelers for the currency exchange, I can say, for example, that there is a Revolut coming in or any other challenging bank, and all those customers go online and don't use traditional currency exchange offices. Right? So this is the change that's going influence, or this is the trend that is going to influence my value chain, and I will need to figure out what to do with it. I can also say that because I need the office, let's say rents for the office are going up, but on the other hand, there is certain unemployment, so it's easier, or clerks are getting cheaper, etc., etc. So this is how your components or components in your environment are going to change. There is a couple of maps here. Pedro said it's a home consumer, electricity contract, other products, shop, point of sale. Do you, Pedro, know? Do you know how those things can change? Is there any pressure on change amongst those components?
Well, maybe on the, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. I would say on the production side with the renewables energies, so, and there's always a concern to develop also new products, and like, for instance, talking about Tesla batteries and stuff, that's what I would say that would be products that are being developed to be sold to as potential new kind of products for the consumers.
Yep, so that's an excellent. So we have excellent answer. So we have renewables, we have batteries. I have added it to your map. So those are those new products that will come in here for the consumers. We call them we put them in the Genesis space because we think they are new, but they should be rather somewhere here. So we know what will be influencing your value chain, and we know. But the question is how they will influence your value chain. If this is the external change that's coming into your organization, the primary concern I would have in this situation is how to handle it. Now, if you are building custom products and packages, what do you need to do in order to be ready for those components to be part of your value chain? So your strategy could be probably as simple as experiment with those two things. Is there a way that you could experiment with them?
Well, yes. I mean, I have to, if I'm understanding you correctly, I would have to see how, as you said, experiment with them and see how they would fit into a package that I could sell to my customers as a utility supplier, right? So I'd have to see what are they capable of, how they would integrate with my infrastructure, what changes would I need to do to my own infrastructure and the way I produce electricity, and then how I could turn that itself into something that I could sell to my customers.
Yeah, that sounds pretty sound to me. One comment I would build on the top of that is that you will be experimenting and experiments can fail. So it's important to design them in such a way that they are safe to fail and be ready to learn instead of gaining financial reward. Perhaps some scope limiting would be helpful in that space. But overall, it sounded really good. The next map is Moss Dental Claims System. We have dentist on the top, and dentist wants to claim money from the insurance. The dentist needs the computer network FTP data, claim clearinghouse, and claim distribution. So who created this map?
Oh.
Moss. Oh, okay, Moss.
Hi.
Hi. Could you tell us how this process works?
Basically, in the system, dentists will use custom software to submit claims to a custom backend, but then that is then sent to various insurance companies as a clearinghouse.
Mm-hmm.
So the custom parts are the front end for the dentist and the back end for aggregating the claim data, the insurance claim data. Other things like the infrastructure is more a commodity. And then the clearinghouse is kind of custom for each insurance company. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes it's specific and sometimes it's not. The thing that's interesting is that the clearinghouse currently charges for submitting claims. If some possibilities would be if there is some intermediary that pushed clearinghouses more to commodity, that would be something that would change the market. Or if there was something that would, our product was specifically to do the front end data, the patient insurance claim. But if the claims were to become more consistent, it might not be that you need our front end product as much, if that was more of a commodity.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting situation, because it looks like in this value chain, we have things which are on the right, which are completely commodity, and they can be easily swapped and replaced, and they don't constitute your competitive advantage at all. We have the central source, or the central organization which owns all the power in the value chain, or plenty of power, right? Because they basically make all the money, and they are probably very expensive. And I guess that what you do is you provide interface for insurance claims and for claim distribution. So this is what your software does, right?
Yeah.
And you said it's custom built because probably you are building it and it looks like it's custom built for you, but is it custom built for your customers?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But it could be, basically it's just a translation from the front end to to their standard claim formats according to HIPAA. So basically, between the claim distribution and the clearinghouse is all HIPAA standard.
Standard claim format. So that's important because that needs
the
to
ASCII
be
837.
Yeah, so it needs to be put in here. So it looks actually pretty interesting because you have those dentists who have pretty much different. I mean, they are using different processes. You are standardizing them and putting them into the clearinghouse. So it looks like your success is tied to the market fragmentation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the moment that those people from the clearinghouses start to standardizing their offering, you may be in a pretty difficult situation.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of time before, I mean, you are the expert in the field, but I would assume they are going to do it anytime soon because they probably see value in going up in the value chain. And what you are trying to do, you are trying to say that you could be trying to say that they are invisible to dentists because dentists interact through your system.
Yeah.
And if you will be able to say that this is the stuff that dentists see and everything below is invisible, like you have cut dentists from clearinghouse altogether, you will be able to replace the clearinghouse or launch your own clearinghouse. Who owns customers owns the business.
The dentist owns the customers?
In this space, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm not sure what I would do in your situation, but it's certainly isolating dentists from clearinghouses looks like something it would be worth exploring. I'm not sure what will be the right experiment in this space, maybe a learning activity, whether you have any dangling ends or whether there are any connections between dentists and clearinghouses. And the next part would be, what do you need to launch your own clearinghouse? That's it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, this is just a discussion, and this is the kind of the discussion you should be having with your team, right? It's all about what else can you add here to make those people less relevant, or what can you launch here to replace them, or maybe, and this is also something I could consider, is maybe you should try to exit this space and sell your software to a clearinghouse or become a part of the clearinghouse. So to remove the battle between those two units and basically operate as a subsidiary or as a part of the bigger organization which owns a lot of value chain.
That's interesting. What the three solutions that you talked about were three things that we discussed that took like months to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, it takes a month to talk about them, but what is important is that you will never have enough of data, to be able to pick any of those. Because once you have the data, it's too late. Something has already happened. So we are thinking rather in terms of the risk. And the question is, what could you do in the next 4 to 6 weeks to learn more which option you should pursue?
Interesting. Thanks.
So I will leave it here. Then there is a map created by Jorge. Jorge, could you tell us what's on this map? Jorge, am I pronouncing your name properly?
Sorry, Daniel, just a quick help from Pedro. It's probably Portuguese, so Jorge.
Jorge, okay. Jorge's not here. This looks very incomplete. I will skip it. Fred, could you tell us what's on your map?
apologies to add much, but I just thought about if a client needs business agility, what would they need? You know, what would be the needs? And so I started to think about sort of value stream organizations, self-governing squads, decoupled architecture. And I didn't get very far, I'm afraid. But the decoupled architecture is an interesting one. Obviously, that's central to business agility.
Okay, so
think that through in terms of what's their architecture look like now, and why is it so difficult for squads to get that change into life?
if I may comment on this, because this is a very interesting aspect, I will move to this ugly map here. What I find important to the business agility is you have to have defined very strict interfaces around components. This is possible to do only in the product or rental and the commodity utility space. Because things here don't change, experimentation in this space, depending on components in the mature space, is easier. If you say your organization needs to be agile, it probably means it has to explore value with their customers, which looks a little bit like trying to figure out what are their business needs in the custom build space. To do that efficiently, you need to have standard components, and components are standard only if you can put API around them. Smart trade-off. If you can put API around them. What you cannot do is to use plenty of custom built components, because custom built components have very blurred borders. So if you put a stack like this together, plenty of custom built components depending on each other, you basically create a spaghetti monster incapable of moving.
Yep. That's what they've got now.
Yeah. So in that situation, what may be an important exercise is to actually look at what components do they have and whether there are market equivalents which are more advanced. Typical example is like if you have private cloud, which was custom built just for you 20 years ago and you are still using it, it may be worth to adopt public cloud, because it takes 6 months to start a server here and a couple of seconds to start a server here.
Yep.
If they are building their own machine learning stuff in the custom build space, it may be worth to explore whether there are public services available in this space and basically disband this team and embrace whatever is out there in the market, even if it require rewriting parts of your system. So if you want to get the business agility, you basically need to remove as many custom built components as possible from the value chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're also typically, I often find it's a mainframe. So you've got a product or rental using IBM's mainframe, for example,
Yeah.
that blocks everything, because everything goes through the mainframe. So it's like becomes a hub for everything, and then we go as fast as the mainframe can go, or you can as fast as you can put changes through the mainframe. So getting away from the mainframe, putting an API over the top of it makes total sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So we have reviewed a couple of maps. You've done a fantastic job. You've seen that strategy actually, because in all those cases, the strategy was created. The strategy isn't something particularly sophisticated, right? It's all about the discussion that can happen around the artifact, such as a map. And it's all about thinking that you may be wrong and figuring out how much money can you spend in experimentation. That's all. Only experimentation can reveal whether a particular direction is correct or incorrect from a strategic thinking. There is no way to know what will be the consequences. Of course, you can anticipate that certain project will bring the money, but you cannot be convinced for sure that it will happen so. So let me go for a second back to your to your expectations. I've talked about understanding the relationship between strategy and agile practices. There is a famous saying that execution eats strategy for breakfast. The reality is that there is no difference between strategy and execution. If you have a brilliant strategy that you cannot execute, it means that you have no strategy at all, right? You have to be able to execute your strategy. How to determine which is the best strategy to follow inside the organization? There are two aspects of it. One is what your company should do, and the other one, what you should do. And I'm not going to enter into this conversation because there is obviously a conflict. What's good for you is not necessarily good for the company. It's always the case because the companies are driven by short-term financial results, at least publicly listed companies. So the main concern of the board usually, and the main concern of all the high-level managers is looking good in the next 2-3 years, through 2-3 years time window. It's not necessarily the same what's good for every one of you. Know a framework to guide you on a strategy definition. We did this. We did worldly mapping. First, you analyze your environment, then you analyze your company and try to figure out how they both align. How to align strategic value and operational team value produced? Very good question. If you have your value chain, this one is nicer. If you have your value chain, what's on a worldly map is here is the value in this space that is being delivered to end users. Here are all the components. The question is whether impact or whether a change to a particular component, incremental one, will propagate through this value chain and deliver value to end users. If not, then probably you shouldn't bother. Changes that easily propagate to customers are significant changes in characteristics. So you take something which is custom built, replace it with product rental, or replace it with commodity utility. If there is a lot of uncertainty in the custom build, there is probably a lot of the risk, the cost of managing risk is probably also high. If you move to stable components, your risk management becomes more inexpensive and costs you less, and you can then forward savings in this space to your customers or to your shareholders. But what you need to know before you do that, you need to know what value is being delivered to your customers, what's the value chain, and what is the impact of change in a particular component on your customers. We typically do this by assembling together representatives of various teams and the business team and trying to figure out what will happen if you do, I don't know, if you start using like 5% cheaper power provider, or if you switch to a different provider, or if you do something differently. 80 to 90% of actions inside the organizations are probably waste of time because when applied to this thinking discipline, they have no impact on the customers here, or sometimes have negative impact because they introduce more components in the custom build space, which hampers company operations for a long period of time. How to consider my company singularity in a strategy tool? Can I get this elaborated? I'm afraid I cannot answer that in this in this case. We've talked about buying, building, and contracting stuff. How to really talk about value when the organization doesn't know? It's all the same. You create this simple diagram, which shows what value is being delivered to customers and what is the value chain that delivers the value. This basic image is enough to get representative of each team to understand what's the overall situation and how their work contributes to value generation. This works not only for individual workers, it works also for executive teams. If you prepare a map that covers your business and you show it to the business executives, they most of the time will understand what's on the map. They will not understand all the mechanics and all the dependencies, but they will be able to relate what they see with what they know. And then you can engage into the discussion whether you've got everything right. It's a useful thing to do. And if you've got everything right, which actions and which risks do you want to take? Which experiments do you want to run? But in order to approach the executive, you need to do the work yourself and create the worldly map, the value chain, identify the customer, identify the value being delivered. Sometimes it's all about talking to other people. Sometimes it's about writing something up and creating a diagram. Once you have the artifact and you know more or less where do you want to play and what do you want to do, you can approach the executive. Okay, so we still have some time left. What are the questions you have? What you would like to have? What you would like to discuss? Yeah, basically that. Questions?
So Christoph, it's Fred here. Thanks again for a great presentation. My question is around, as you move in your strategy, obviously there's an as is and there's a to be in the strategy. You want to move things to the right in many circumstances to stabilize things. What's your hints and tips around calculating the impact of doing that? So, because the board will go, yeah, that's great, I get that, but to go cloud, to go this, to go that, that's going to cost us. And what's going to be the benefit case for doing that? So any thoughts, tips, comments on calculating benefit case from an as is to be using the map and how you can communicate that using the map?
Okay, so that's a really difficult question. That's a real challenge. And I'm afraid my thinking in this space is very limited because mostly I don't. Okay, so there is a saying, and Dave Snowden often says that every framework which starts with to be is pointless because you never know what will be the future. So it's rather as is and the direction you want to move in. Right. So, and if it's about the direction you want to move in, you want to do small step, hence the experimentation. In terms of bigger movements, such as, for example, the cloud, if you cannot migrate in small chunks like services or smaller products first, and your board wants to know the return on investment, it's impossible to calculate it because what cloud brings flexibility. As I was drawing it here on this value chain, cloud is in fact a lot, hundreds of components in this space. Very mature, very stable, useful in assembling new products and services. So if you move to cloud, you will have access to all those products and services, and you will be able to build or explore value with your customers faster and cheaper. The question is, do you know and can you know what opportunities are out there? Most probably you cannot say, because you don't know the future, you don't know the future opportunities, you know only your existing costs, right? So the argumentation is that you want to move to the cloud to be able to explore that future opportunities. The next part of the argumentation is that if you don't move to the cloud, you will stay with this expensive stack, and over time, your company will be locked with existing customers and will sooner or later become a dinosaur, because you will not be able to change. So it's a risk mitigation. Moving to the cloud is a risk mitigation because you want to stay agile and nimble. Now, not all boards will buy this thinking, especially if they are extremely risk aware and their business built on this stack is doing well. There is nothing you can do to convince them. If they don't buy the flexibility and unknown future opportunities, which may be there and may not be there, and they don't have a budget to experiment with the cloud, I don't have an answer what to do in this space. Maybe change a company. That's not always the option.
But wouldn't you, sorry, can I add to the
Sure.
conversation? But wouldn't you agree that it's kind of a two-parter in the sense that you do have part of the business case that you can actually estimate. You can actually estimate the costs of migrating to the cloud, how much cost you're going to have with data transfer, keeping the processing power, whatever. And then you have this whole world that it's potential, but it all depends on what are we going to do next, right?
Mm-hmm. So you can calculate the cost. The migration can be calculated, and I think there are companies and approaches that do that. But my understanding is that cloud is always more expensive than your custom built stuff, especially if you do the migration in the wrong way and you take VMwares from your private cloud and move them one-to-one into the public cloud without using all the goodies, which are the pre-built services, right? So yeah, you can calculate the cost, but that's only one side of the equation. The other part of the equation is how much value will you be able to capture with cloud?
Right.
How much lower will be the cost of developing a simple service which you can assemble from ready components instead of building all the components that you need to assemble the single service?
And that, in your experience, is more of a leap of faith rather than an Excel sheet demonstrating that we'll have profits.
Yes, exactly. I mean, leap of faith, that's a very strong word, but this is what we use the term position. And if you have a situation where you have plenty of custom built components, your position basically cannot change. So you will exist as long as your existing market niche. If you want to adapt, and all organizations have to adapt sooner or later, you have to have a position which allows you to adapt, right? So I've been looking into this space. I've been trying to put the number on flexibility, but this is basically the principle that comes from not being able to tell what is in the future. You want to stay flexible, right? And this is like a strategic value or a value in itself. You want to stay flexible. And it doesn't have so far. I wasn't being able to file to say what's the value of being flexible, because the value comes from all the opportunities that you will be able to capture, or not.
I agree with that. I think there's obviously, as you said, there's an operating cost, potential operating cost benefit, or maybe not if you do it correctly. But for me, the big benefit is that the value flow of the organization, the ability to change, isn't bottlenecked through a thing. And the classic example here is, I know we're talking abstract, you've got an open frame and everything goes through the mainframe. So the value flow is as fast as the mainframe can make changes. So your rate limiting factor to change is that when you decouple DevOps architecture, decentralized architecture, microservices, etc., then that allows teams to in a coupled way, and therefore the speed of change increases. I don't know if exponentially, but it goes to the rate limiting factor out to live. So, and what's the value of that? So I think there is a massive difference between a sort of centralized architecture and a decentralized architecture. I think that's where the argument is. But you're right, what the value will be of each team and what values they will bring, whether they'll invent the next WhatsApp or the next, the next billion-dollar thing is open for interpretation. But you can say, I think, that the value flow will be in teams working concurrently rather than having to come through a single bottleneck. But great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? We are approaching the end of time, I think. So there is one more tool I wanted to show you. And this is, okay, I hope it will be useful because this is something called doctrine. I've talked about the importance of position and the importance of some values, such as being able to change. Simon identified a whole set of, I would say, principles that your organization should have. And those principles include things like use a common language. And we basically have only 3 very intuitive levels of each of those principles. It's like use a common language. Red, everyone thinks and speaks something differently. Yellow, there is some, let's say, beginnings of common language. And green, everyone in the organization can talk to anyone else. There is stuff like provide purpose, mastery, and autonomy, which probably resonates with many of you. We have organizations which do very poorly in this space, and we have organizations which do really great. If you would like to start with this strategy, this may be the right place to do, because doing worldly maps is quite difficult, especially if you are the only person who knows worldly mapping in the beginning. It's still possible, but it may be difficult. If you look at the doctrine and evaluate your organization, we do this great, we are not focused on outcomes, we don't have a bias towards action, you don't have, we know how to exploit the landscape a little bit, we listen to our ecosystem, you can more or less say what is the position of your organization and how well it can adapt to the market, right? Organizations which are very adaptable are green or almost green. Organizations which we would consider more traditional are almost like entirely red. So they are not willing to change and they don't have tools to change inside the organization. So I'm just showing it as something that may be interesting. Do the self-assessment, see how are you doing, and see whether there are things that you could improve in your organization with potentially very low cost and rather high impact. Not the strategy, but very closely associated, because this strategy requires execution, and those are all things that are needed for the execution. If there is no questions, I will still be staying here around. I would like to thank you for your participation, for our discussions. If you have any questions, ping me, connect me on LinkedIn or anywhere else. I'm happy to help you with drawing worldly maps and starting with your strategy. Thank you.
Great session, Christoph. Thanks so much.